Welcome to our series on St. Matthew's Gospel. We are now in chapter 27 of Matthew's Gospel, and we want to look at the trial of Jesus before Pilate, who represents the superpower of the world at the time. This trial is extremely important. We have witnessed the trial of Jesus before the Jewish high priests. In other words, religion condemned its author. And now we want to know, will the world condemn its creator? All things were made through him and for him, and without him nothing was made. And so you not only have the church, if I can put it that way, on trial, but you also have the world on trial. The Lord stands in front of the whole of his creation, both the religious side of it and the material side of it, and he wants the world to give him back a response. And the response is quite shocking. Quite shocking. When you go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, you're told that man was made to rule the world, to be Lord of the earth. And here man is the Lord of the earth and he's ruling the earth. But will he recognize where he came from, and will he recognize his relationship with God? And of course the answer is no. We also have in this trial of Jesus before Pilate, we have the final fateful decision that Israel makes about her Messiah. The final one. And it's this particular decision that Israel makes about Jesus that will change sacred history and will turn it in a completely new direction. Now, what Matthew wants you to see is that it's not Jesus's decision about Israel, because St. Paul tells us in 1 Timothy 2:5 that God wants everyone to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. So it's not Jesus' decision about Israel, it's Israel's decision about Jesus that brings about something that is so shocking that nobody actually says it. But I'm going to say it. It's terribly shocking. There will be an exodus out of Israel into the rest of the world. The exodus is supposed to be into Israel, into the promised land. But now the exodus is going to be out of the promised land, and the rest of the world is going to be given an opportunity for each land to become a promised land, for each land to become a holy land. Because a holy land, according to our way of thinking, is a land where Jesus dwelt, a land where Jesus and Mary and Joseph lived. But every land where the Blessed Sacrament is established is a holy land. Your land is holy. My land is holy. In this new Exodus, he sanctifies the whole earth. The whole earth belongs to him. But for a Jewish way of thinking, it's completely unspeakable that you would say words like that. As far as they're concerned, that's a contradiction of everything that has happened up to now. But Matthew wants you to hear that it's not Jesus' decision about them. He loves them enough to die for them. It's their decision about him. And our destiny in the future as individuals and as nations also depends on our relationship with him and our decision about him. Hence you worry about the Western world today rejecting Christ, rejecting Christianity, rejecting Christian morality. Where are we going? There is nowhere to go. If you reject him, the future is unspeakable. We have too much example of that in the scriptures. There's Egypt, allowed to reach its pinnacle and then went into decline when it rejected the Lord. Israel reached its pinnacle when it rejected the Lord, sudden death. The Christian world was given 2,000 years to reach its peak. If we are rejecting him, he has plenty other people to bring into the kingdom of God. We just need to learn the lesson. This is something we have to actually look at. And so we're going to look at, first of all, the interrogation of Jesus by Pilate, and then something that Pilate does that he doesn't realize the significance of. And you realize that the chief priests did something with the blood money that they didn't realize the significance of. Pilate is going to do something as well that he doesn't realize the significance of. But Matthew wants you to know, and he wants you to understand, because it was written for you and for me. So the first part of the trial, Matthew says, Jesus then was brought before the governor, and the governor put him into an interrogation. Now, the translation I've used is slightly different from what you get in other translations. An older translation will say, Jesus was handed over to Pilate. Because the Passion is that Judas handed Jesus over to the chief priests. The chief priests handed Jesus over to the Roman authorities, and the Roman authorities handed Jesus over to death. Handed Jesus over is an English translation of a word which means betrayed. He's betrayed, betrayed, betrayed. And when we see that the Roman authorities will betray him to death, they're no better than the Jewish authorities. Human beings are all the same. We all are belonging to a fallen race, and we are all in desperate need of a saviour. So when Jesus is being interrogated by Pilate, Pilate is a pagan. He only knows the various gods of the Olympus dealt with in Rome. He knows nothing about truth. He knows nothing about the scriptures. He knows nothing about the issues that are driving Israel to a ferment. He knows nothing about that. All he knows about is that Caesar is in charge of the world and he's running the world, and if somebody is fighting against Caesar, it's treason. It's sedition. He understands that. So he understands criminals, but he's never before had a saint on trial. And he has no idea what to do with the saint. None whatsoever. Partly because he's never seen one before. And he himself is no saint. So he can't handle what's in front of him. And what's more, we have seen in the trial of Jesus before the Sanhedrin that he was tried as the Messiah and the Son of God. And so in claiming to be the Son of God, he was condemned for blasphemy. Now, to tell Pilate that this man is condemned to death for blasphemy would be laughable. The man wouldn't know what you were talking about. You blaspheme, so what? He's an unbeliever. This is just language people use. So he would just simply throw them all out. So to get Jesus to actually be interrogated by Pilate was the first thing that the Sanhedrin had to ensure. And so they had to change the charges. Now, if you thought there was anything legal in this process up to now, you now know the whole thing is illegal. It's illegal, immoral, and terrifying. And you have a man caught in the crosshairs of this terrifying, sinful situation. And he is going to pay for everybody's sins. And so Pilate said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Why would he say that? Herod was there, and everybody knew that Herod would not brook any rivals. And Herod's sons were just as bad. Herod the Great's sons were just as bad as himself, because when he died, the country was divided into 4 sections or tetrarchies, and each of his 4 surviving sons got a crown of their own. I put crown in inverted commas, because as a tetrarch, they couldn't possibly be called a king, but they all insisted on being called king. And so he said, "Are you the king of the Jews? We already have 4. You mean this is a 5th one?" And Jesus replied, "It's you who say it." Now, that would have absolutely thrown Pilate completely, because Jesus is affirming his kingship, but telling this unbeliever that you have spoken the truth. Now, I told you that there was three great unbelievers in the Passion: Judas, the high priest, and Pilate, and Jesus answered each one of them the same: they are your own words, you have said it. But when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he refused to answer at all. Now, Jesus is standing in front of legitimate authority on earth. He's standing in front of legitimate government on earth. Okay? We have to respect legitimate authority and respect legitimate government. But the chief priests continue to accuse Jesus in front of Pilate. These are all new accusations, whatever they were doing. Matthew doesn't even bother wasting his time on what they were. They don't succeed in piling on the pressure on Jesus. Jesus is standing there like a lamb before his shearers. And he is totally peaceful and he's totally calm. And the reason is that back in Gethsemane, he offered his life in atonement for us. So the grisly details are actually not of any value as far as Jesus is concerned. His offering has been made to the Father. His offering has been accepted by the Father. So just get on with it. So Jesus stands before them in silence, but his silence disturbs Pilate. And Pilate is disturbed because he is used to murderers and people really causing sedition and real trouble coming before him, and they would defend themselves violently, and there would be violent language and terrible language, and they'd have to be held down by the soldiers. He's never seen anybody stand before him with the meekness and humility of Jesus, and that Jesus has absolutely no need whatsoever to defend himself. As far as Pilate's concerned, that's inexplicable. He can't handle this. And the one thing he knows is that he's not looking at a criminal. He's not looking at someone that he has to deal with. That whatever is going on, this is between this man and them. The Sanhedrin, nothing whatever to do with me. So Pilate makes a decision rather early in the process. I don't want anything to do with this man. And Pilate said to him, "Can't you even hear the many charges that they brought against you?" But to the governor's complete amazement, he made no defense. Jesus had nobody else to defend him, and he also didn't defend himself. Now, in the eyes of the world, that's completely inexplicable. So Pilate decides, I better do something to get myself out of this situation, because this is some kind of a ferment that's going on between them. I don't understand the issue, so let's out. And Pilate knows nothing about the Davidic king Messiah and cares less. Royal kingship means nothing to him. So these are not issues that he wants to deal with at all. He can't handle it. And the thing that strikes Pilate more than anything else is the anger of the Jewish priesthood. Now, do you think this is the first time Pilate has come to know about Jesus? Everybody in the country knew Jesus. Jesus had a blitz campaign going on in Israel for 3.5 years. Everybody knew about him. The Roman soldiers knew about him. Jesus healed centurions and their servants, and any soldier that came to him looking for help, he helped them the same as he would help anybody else. So Jesus was known. This was just the first time that Pilate meets him face to face. And it's certainly the first time that Pilate meets him in this capacity. Okay? So Jesus is not going to tell Pilate, I am the Son of God. Pilate would say, so what? You know, it's not an issue. Jesus can't say to Pilate, I am the Messiah. It's all the same to Pilate whether you are or not. It's not an issue for him. And so he can't handle the trial. He just can't get it because the issues don't mean anything to him. So what he decides is, we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to get rid of this rather quickly. And so he decides on something that the Jewish priesthood are worried about. And so the Jewish priesthood have to sort of very quickly try and get the crowd on their side. This is stage 2. Stage 1 was just simply the interrogation, are you a king, and so on. Stage 2 is, at festival time, it was the governor's practice to release a prisoner for the people, anyone they chose. Now, no scholar that I know and no researcher that I've ever heard has ever found this particular practice. If it actually went on, there's no evidence in literature or anything else that we've been able to find. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, it just means we don't have the evidence. Now, there was at that time a notorious prisoner whose name was Barabbas. Now, Barabbas is a very interesting name. Bar means the son of, and Abba means father. So, when the crowd gathered, Pilate said to them, these are the vacillating crowd that we've been dealing with all the time in the gospel. These are the people who won't make up their minds, and they're all on Jesus' side when the leadership are not there. But now that the Sanhedrin is there, they won't be on Jesus' side. And not only that, but the Sanhedrin are going to work the crowd to make the crowd do something that in their sane minds they would never, ever have done. So, when the crowd gathered, Pilate said to them, which do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Christ? Now, called the Christ means nothing to Pilate, but he's got to use the language that they're using. And so Matthew has been trying to give you, the reader, more information than anybody present had, so that you will understand the issues all along the way. This isn't just a case of shoving Jesus on to the next and the next and the next. No, there are issues to be dealt with all along the way. And there are now 2 men put before the people of Israel. Both of them are young men. Both of them have exactly the same name, Bar Abba, Jesus Bar Abba. And we know that the Barabbas was also called Jesus. Jesus Bar Abba, 2 men. One a sinner, the other the saint. I hope you recognize what you're looking at. You're looking at the 2 goats on the day of Yom Kippur. One is going to be sent back into the wilderness. One is going to be sent on to the altar. And Barabbas, with all the sin that's in his life, represents the wilderness of Israel. And the people, without understanding the issues and only wanting to do the will of the Sanhedrin, they choose Barabbas and they send Jesus forward for death. Now, they actually make the right decision because Barabbas can't save them. Only Jesus can save them. And if they're sending a victim onto the altar, the victim has to be pure and holy. God will never accept a victim that has defilement in it. And so Barabbas is not fit to be offered to God, not at all. But it's more fit for him to go out into the wilderness of Israel, which is the haunt of demons now that it has rejected its Lord and rejected its Saviour and rejected its grace and has rejected its moment of redemption. So when John the Baptist said he was a voice in the wilderness, Israel really is a wilderness now. A wilderness is a place where the flowers of virtue are not growing. And so it becomes a haunt of demons. So to send Barabbas out there, yes. Now they have to send Jesus on to the altar to be sacrificed, but he has to be flayed for their sins. And I explained in an earlier episode to you that on the day of Yom Kippur, the animal that was chosen to be sent on to the altar for sacrifice, they killed it humanely. And afterwards, they flayed it for the sins of the people, because they said to flay an animal while it is still living is far too cruel. But nobody hesitated in flaying the Son of Man and the Son of God. Nobody hesitated. It's frightening. Jesus is the silent one who is going to experience a brutality that is literally beyond belief. The amazing thing is nobody seems to have any difficulty accepting all the stuff that happened to Jesus. We say, yeah, this happened and that happened and the other happened. But if it happened to anybody else, there would be a war that such a thing could happen to a human being. That any state, that any government would reduce a human being to the level that Jesus was reduced, the rest of the human race would be up in arms correctly. Because it's literally beyond belief. Literally. And yet, they did it. So here, when they choose Barabbas, Pilate comes to a conclusion that is different to theirs. He knows nothing about the spiritual realities involved, nothing at all. All he knows is that that Sanhedrin doesn't like this man. That's all they know. That's the only thing he understands. Matthew gives us a piece of information that's actually very important for us, because the motivation of the Sanhedrin has not yet been revealed. Pilate gets it rather easily. It's in verse 18. Pilate knew that it was out of jealousy that they handed Jesus over. Now, jealousy has got to be brought to its absolute maximum capacity for you to want to violently destroy a person. What were they jealous of? They were jealous of his lineage. He had the correct lineage. He actually was the son of David. They were jealous of the fact that he actually was the Messiah, and they knew it. And he proved it, and they knew it. They knew that his claim to be the Son of God was probably correct. They knew who he was. They were very jealous of his relationship with the people, of his powers, and how they were very jealous of the fact that when he taught the scriptures came completely alive. They were totally jealous of that. They were jealous of his holiness. They couldn't handle any of that. But because of his holiness, they were shown up all the time as the false shepherds and the false teachers that they were. And because of that, it was going to be either him or them that ruled this people. They knew they were looking at the shepherd of Israel, and they, the shepherds of Israel, had been condemned by him because of their behavior and because of their morality, and they are going to take ferocious revenge on him for riding into Jerusalem and claiming before the whole city and the whole nation that he was the Messiah. They were going to make absolutely certain that they were going to see to it that all of that would be reversed in this most cruel of deaths. You'd have to say that Satan entered into them, because this isn't human. This isn't normal. This isn't normal. Not for anybody. Not for Judas and not for them, not for anybody. And so there is a very terrible power behind what is going on in Jerusalem that unfortunately the chief priests, because of their sinfulness, they can't see they're being manipulated. And poor Judas couldn't see it either. And in a time of trial and darkness, Satan will use our own sinfulness to pull us down. We saw that in Gethsemane, that Satan used the refusal of the apostles to pray and fast and keep vigil and prepare, and used their disobedience to Jesus and their disobedience to his teaching to pull them down. Ultimately, it's either God's will or Satan's will as to who will rule the earth. And it's our choice as to which of them actually rules. Thank you for listening. Slán agus beannacht dé live. Goodbye. God bless you.
At the end of Mass, we are told to go out and bring the gospel into our lives. and witness to the gospel by everything that we say and do. It's so important that we are all out there bringing the joy of the gospel to everyone we know. And that's why I'm so pleased to endorse and offer my blessing to Shalom World TV for all that you are doing to bring good news into this world which is often sad and dark and in need of a message of hope. Thank you for what you're doing. May God bless your work always.